Awesome. So, yeah, Brian, thanks for kind of kicking it off, telling a little bit about myself. Like you mentioned, I'm based in Austin, Texas, but even though I was born here, I lived most of my life in Lincoln and worked out of Rebel's Omaha office for 4 or 5 years. And I've been down in Austin for the last about 6-ish, 7 years. I know time goes by pretty quick sometimes. But overall, I've been with Rebel. I became a partner a couple years ago. Been working with him for over a decade after bouncing around a couple other agencies in Nebraska, and I still make it up plenty of times. We've been partnering with the Downtown Improvement District for a long time as well. I know the neighborhood very well as well, so it's kind of my second home, if you will. A little bit about Rebel as well. We were founded in '99. We really, our biggest thing is just all about branding, doing what you love, the freedom to be, making the world a better place as a whole. I mean, we even chose Rebel, the name, after Caroline, one of our founders' motorcycles, and we just really try and encompass, no matter what you do, making sure you're very authentic to your brand, whether it's in print, whether it's in person, whether it's online, whether it's your advertising efforts, just really making sure that you're putting one voice forward and not diluting your brand. As we go kind of from genre to genre, and just, it can really dilute it and make you feel really inauthentic, if you will. So kind of kicking off here, when we take a look at this, I'm going to address really 4 main areas. This is such a broad topic of really owning Google that we can look at it from a website perspective, we can look at it from social, from email marketing, and all those things are big parts of what really make up your Google, kind of making it your bitch, if you will. But the 4 areas I'm going to focus on in here are your Google My Business listings, your Google Search Engine Console, understanding Google Analytics, and then last but not least, AdWords, which is kind of the paid effort. So the first 3 really go to what we call organic SEO, which is non-paid. It's really kind of growing what you have and what you have access to without having to spend any extra money on that. A couple of things I'm going to gloss over because I know they've been spoken previous is, the social aspect. The more people you can drive to your site from there, it's going to help your SEO. A lot of your on-site content as well, including making sure you have your keywords in the content, using your title tags correctly, making sure your site's coded in that proper format. We could really probably do an hour on every single topic. So this is going to be kind of a high-level overview, and I'll have my contact info at the end as well. So if anybody needs some further clarification, feel free to reach out on that. But let's go ahead and get started. So again, here's when I was going to say I did not name this, but Brian beat me to the punch on that. So let's just get started. So first, we're going to take a look at Google My Business. So what this is as you kind of see on the right here, I'm sure plenty of people seen it, whether it's on your mobile device or on your desktop. Basically, it's not your website. It's not the search engine listings from that, but it is kind of right here where you can call, get directions, send a message, see it on the maps, things like that. So here's a couple different views that you might see from time to time. When you Google, a lot of times this screen on the left here is what we take a look at. It'll be to the right-hand side. And let's say right now you Googled Rebel Interactive and you're in the Omaha area, you will see this information on here. Depending on where you are at in the city or the world, those can vary a lot. So on the right, for instance, if we just Googled Austin music stores, for instance, this is another view that you'll see. And these are often above or directly next to the primary listings. So when we look at Google business listings, this is taking control of this aspect. It doesn't really have much to do with your actual website or things like that, but it's really taking a look at how you're presented in that first view. And these map views are very, very important, especially nowadays with mobile being the dominant way that people are visiting your website or just finding you online. Being on this map view, having accurate information are some of the biggest pieces that we can really hope for on here. So as we take a look at some of the things we can do in here, some of the big parts are, again, sharing accurate information, making sure you're found on a variety of devices. You can manage your reviews, which is very big, and we'll touch on that. And then getting on this map so we can see that. So one of the main reasons it is important is once you've gotten in and you have your listing taken care of, as we see on this left image here, we can change our name, we can change which categories we're in, we can change where we show up on the map, we can add service areas, we can change our hours. We can do all of those. Google inherently is really good at grabbing that information by default. They will kind of scour the web, they'll scour your website, your Facebook posts, all of those, and fill a lot of this information in for you. But the problem is a lot of times there's inaccurate information or outdated information. And when you go in and you verify your listings, it gives you full control over what's being displayed there. We can also see performance here. So that's one thing just right off the bat. When we get into analytics a little bit later, there's going to be a lot of options that we have for viewing a lot more in performance. But at a quick overview, it could show you how many times you're showing up in your search view, how many times you're showing up in your map view, things like that over the last month. And you can change your ranges, things like that. It also gives you a quick little link to jump over and advertise. It gives you a chance to see all your reviews. And then last but not least, by default, they're going to kind of pick and choose what images are going to be shown. But when you're in the Google My Business listing and you go in and you verify it, you own it, manage it, you get a chance to go in. You get to upload your logo, making sure it's in the best format. You get to update your cover photo. So maybe it's seasonal. Maybe you have winter sales. Maybe you have you know, an event coming up that you want to promote. You're able to go in and change those. So when people click in and they view your listings, as opposed to Google just scouring the web and doing what they think is best, they give you an option to have a say in that. And last but not least, you can have videos that you upload right into there. So again, they might grab a video that you posted on Facebook. Chances are they won't, but sometimes things will just pop up in there. But when you go in and you own this, you have the say in how you're being presented. And usually this is the very first thing that people see when they Google for your business, or maybe they're just Googling a clothing store in the old market or a restaurant. Any of those, sometimes they're broader views, and so they might not be looking directly for you. So this is your chance to let them know what you're really all about here. Okay, so you kind of got to that point. You get a little overview, but you don't know what to do. What do you do next? How do you start this process? So what we go in, and if you go and you search for your business, if you've claimed it already, awesome, you're already a step ahead of the process. If you haven't, you will see this option to suggest an edit and also own this business. So suggest an edit lets people say, hey, I think this location is closed. Or they can just kind of be a jerk and say, hey, I'm going to say their hours are messed up, things like that. But when you own it, you can go in here, you can claim your business listing, which allows you to start to gain control over that. And once you click on that, you have a few different options here, which is the verify it section. So hopefully either your phone or email address is correctly already in place just from what Google's gone in and searched for. So if it is, it gives you an option right away. If that number matches the one that's listed on there, you can say call or text. And what it's going to do is it's going to either call or text you a 6-digit PIN. You type that in, it knows that, hey, someone from this business answered the phone or received the text and got the information. If not, there's the email option. Sometimes though, these aren't correct. That maybe it was a previous owner, maybe it's just wrong information. The unfortunate aspect of this is because you don't own it yet, you don't have an option, you don't own the listing, you don't have an option to change that. So you can't say, hey, can you just call this number instead? So that kind of leaves us with our third option, which is you can have a postcard by mail. So they will physically mail you this little 4x6 postcard. It's going to say, you get to say who it's made out to and things like that, but it's going to have that same code. So in this instance, you would have to wait around 5 days. Usually it's pretty quick. Sometimes it's only 1 or 2 days, but it's not instantaneous like the phone or email aspect. But then you'll get a postcard, and then you can come back to your listing and go ahead and enter that code just like you would the first time if you would have been able to take a phone call. But once you verified it, then you're in the clear. That's where you start to own it. So one of the first things you'll see this whole left-hand menu. You can go in, you can see home, you can do posts just like you are on Facebook. You have the opportunity to update your info, view your insights, your reviews. You can even turn on messaging so people can message you directly from Google. You can upload a variety of photos. If you are wanting to kind of look at an e-commerce aspect of it, not a full store, but it does allow you to put in products. You get to choose your services, list your website on there, or websites if you have multiple, and then also manage users. So maybe you want to own the listing, but you have somebody else at your business that is actually going to do the day-to-day. You can temporarily assign that and give users different level permissions on this. Once we own it, like we said, we really kind of go into this management mode on it. So this is kind of a bigger view of what the listing page looks like. So once you own it, you start to manage. So every day you can go in, you could say, I'm going to add a new post on here, just like you would on Facebook. You could copy that post, put it on your Google page. Especially during kind of the trying times that we're all in right now, you might have specialty hours. So throughout the rest of the year, you might always be open 9 to 5, but right now it's just not worth it, or it doesn't make sense. Maybe you're open Tuesday through Friday from 10 to 7 instead, so you can kind of beef up that foot traffic. You can go in and add these temporary hours in there. You can say what holidays you're closed on. You can really kind of go in and do anything that you want to do in here, just to make sure that people are getting your info. Another big thing that I would really say with this too is when you're putting your info on Facebook, when you're putting your info in Google, let's say you're doing Yelp, any of those, it's called a NAP listing. It stands for name, address, phone number. Be very, very consistent on that. Don't say you're at 123 house ST on one and 123 house street on the other. And be careful when you're saying suite or building number, things like that. Make sure you're using the exact same format for every listing. It's just a very small thing, but it definitely kind of helps long-term boost you up on that. And then once you've kind of gotten everything where you want, you have it submitted. Listings usually can take up to 3 days to be published. They just like to verify them too, to make sure you're not putting anything malicious in there or anything against the terms and service of Google, but 99.9% of the time you should be just fine on that. And then the last piece that I kind of like to touch on this too is we've all seen the Google reviews. A lot of times they just show up as stars on there. The more reviews you have in general, the higher you're going to show up in that. That shows Google that people are engaging and using it on a regular basis. So I would definitely recommend, asking your customers, your friends, your family to leave some reviews on there. But not just do that. Go in here on a regular basis and see who has left you a review. Ideally, 95% of them are positive, but even reply to those. It's one of those things that shows the person that left the review, you appreciate them. It also shows someone that might not know who you are, that you're a very engaged owner or manager of this. And it gives you an opportunity too, if someone had a bad experience, to say, hey, we're sorry this happened, reach out to us, we'd like to make it right. Or, in worst case scenario, tell your side of the story if someone's just making up some BS there in front of you. So that area I think is often overlooked. People just like to see the reviews, but I think the engagement aspect on this is a really big part. Because for the most part, once you've got all your listings set in place, you're not going to have to go in here very often unless you need to change your hours or you want to upload some new products or photos, things like that. So after you kind of have this set up, it's the baseline, I feel like, for any business. But next we start talking about, what about your website? Let's say you already have your website up and running, and if you don't have a website, I definitely recommend getting one, first off. And B, the rest of this won't be quite as applicable to you, just because we are talking about getting web traffic and getting your listings out there and making you easily findable online. You do not need to have a website to show up in the Google My Business listings, but it does help, and it helps you move up in the ranks. And this next piece is, once you have your website live already, what are the next steps? So Google Search Console really helps you monitor, maintain, troubleshoot a little bit of everything on your site's presence at a pretty top level overview where, again, you don't need to get that involved on a regular basis. It'll send you alerts if things are wrong. But once you get it in there, it kind of gives you a leg up on the competition that might not be doing that. So once you go in, you give them your domain, you hit continue, it's going to make you confirm that you own the website in a couple of different ways. It might have you upload a file, or if you're a little more tech savvy, you can add some info to your host records on your DNS and things like that. If it's something you don't know, reach out to the person that built your website, and they can probably help you out. They should know what kind of verification you need to do on that. Once you get logged in, though, it kind of gives you a little bit of everything. You get to see some very high-level analytics that aren't quite the same as Google Analytics. It also allows you, again, to have a little bit more say on how you submit your information to Google. So you can put up your sitemaps, your URLs. Let's say you have a couple URLs on your site that you don't want them to look at because maybe it's more informational as to a specific set. So you create a link on your website, fire it off to one company in particular. You can tell Google, hey, don't crawl this, this URL if you don't have it password protected. You can also go in there and see, hey, maybe something's wrong. You have a broken link on your site. Some images aren't loading. Which URLs are having issues? A lot of it too, even if there's different devices, it'll start to tell you what some of the differences are. If, hey, on mobile, you're not going to rank as high because your text is too small, things like that. So it really helps you understand how Google sees your pages as opposed to the average user, and gives you some tips to tweak that and really play by their rules as much as possible. So when you get logged into here, right away you kind of see your performance on how you're showing up on there. In this instance, this would be someone that you could tell is very Monday through Friday and not much of a weekend business, because we could see a dip on every page. You can go in, you could see that this is a very large site, so there's 4,200 pages almost, but there are 21 pages with some errors on it. So we'll want to take a look at what those may be. And then this is a huge one that we want to take a look at now more so than ever. 4 or 5 years ago, it was kind of a small portion of it, but Google's taking a look at a mobile-first approach to everything. So more people are viewing your site in 90% industries on their phone than they are on the desktop. Some of us that sit in an office more than others that are on their feet might still be used to viewing them primarily on your website. I mean, on your desktop or laptop, but people are really getting their first impression of you on their phone more often. So on this, you could take a look at some certain pages and say, okay, they're having some issues with this. They think the text is too small. Some of the clickable elements are too close together, which means, if you got fat thumbs like I do and you're trying to push this little button and you have 2 or 3 of them next to each other, there's a lot more room for error. This one, there might not be a viewport set, which just means readjust the screen size depending on what device the user's on. And another one, some content is wider than the screen, so you might have to scroll left to right as opposed to having it automatically resize in a responsive environment there. So depending on the type of business you are, some of this might be stuff that you handle on your own. It might be some good information just to be aware of, so you can speak with your web designer, web developer, things like that to say, hey, I'm getting some errors on this. Google wants us to do these 2 or 3 things, and it's going to help kind of boost up your ratings on there. Another thing that you can do on here as well is a URL inspection. So maybe you're doing a seasonal landing page. You want to go in and give a little bit of information about a particular sale. You're linking from Facebook to one specific URL, not just your homepage, things like that. You can go in and actually paste a specific URL on your website in here, and it'll let you know how it's trending on there. It can say, hey, we've already indexed it. It's not in your sitemap though. If you made a change to it recently, you can request it to recrawl. On average, Google's already crawling your website every week or 2. But if you have some more pertinent changes, it's something you can go in and give them a little nudge to take a look at it a little bit more. And it could say, hey, this page isn't mobile friendly. You could click in on these, learn a little bit more information, and it'll kind of help you get to that next step of making sure your site's really kind of getting toned in for what these next couple of pieces we're going to take a look at is. So once we've got a good grasp on this, like I said at the beginning of this, there's a ton of information, so I'm sorry if I'm kind of speeding through this. I'll definitely have some time for some answers, and feel free to contact me directly. It's a lot to kind of get in, but I really feel like these are the 4 main areas that you really want to pay attention to. And even if you're not even close to being a master at it, which is incredibly difficult, I don't consider myself a master at every single aspect of this, but I'm very well versed in it, have a lot of experience. It's just something to be aware of, and really kind of gets you into this next step. So you've got your listing secured, you've tightened up your website. Then what's next? Your website's running, it's out there, it's doing a great job, or maybe it's not doing as good of a job as you want, and you want to know why. You say, well, I set up my Google listing, I submitted it to my Search Console, I thought that should be it. Well, now's when we get into the little bit deeper aspect of it, where we start to take a look at the analytics of it. So in the Search Console, there's that brief performance area that you can get some information, but now's when you really delve deep into Google Analytics. This, again, I'll give you a high-level overview, and just at that gives you a ton of information that's very, very useful. I'm not even going to begin to kind of dig into how in-depth you can get in just a simple free tool like that, like this is. There are other analytics out there, but I definitely wouldn't necessarily recommend jumping into those if you don't at least have a light understanding of Google Analytics, because there's a lot of paid options. Sure, some people's thoughts might differ on that, but I feel like get yourself versed a little bit in Google Analytics, and if you feel you're outgrowing it, there's a lot of great options out there. But this is going to handle a good chunk of most businesses' information that they need. So right when you get logged in here, it's going to give you a lot of little dashboards on here. And so it's pretty cool. You can go in and you can say, okay, in the last 7 days, here's how I've been trending. I could see that my users are up 32%. That's awesome. Sessions are up even further, which is awesome, which means people are returning to your site. Your bounce rate is up though. And that's not a good bounce rate in there. That means people are going to your page, they're getting one piece of information, and then they're bouncing out of there. Sometimes it's all right because you'll have a landing page where they got the info they needed and they bounce. But a lot of times you want them to explore a little bit more. And then you can also see your session duration. This means how long they were on your website at that given point. In the bottom left here, we could see this is just for the last 7 days in this screenshot. You can set custom ranges. You can say, hey, I want the last month. I want the last 90 days. You could even put comparison rates to say, this last 7 days versus the previous 7 days, things like that. And then it'll give you a quick little view on the right here, which means this is active users right now. So as you're in there looking at these stats right now, the ones on the right will kind of bounce around a little bit. So right now there was only 2 active users at that exact moment on a screenshot, and those were the 2 pages that they're visiting. But that will vary throughout the day, and you can get a real-time report as it lets you know there on the right. Also on the primary dashboard, it lets you know a little bit more about how you acquire your users. So when we get into looking at some options for AdWords right after this, this is what the paid search comes in. It could also be through some other paid search channels. But at a quick overview, you can go in and see if people are getting you from a Google search result, if they're directly typing in your URL, how you're showing up, whether it's paid search, whether it's social, things like that. On this quick view dashboard, it's just kind of giving you a little bit of information, but you can tell in all of these little boxes, there's an acquisition report, there's more insights, there's things like that that let you know what's going on at any given point. So you can really use this as a top level overview and click through and really dig deeper into your data each time. This next piece lets you know a little bit more about how are your users trending over time. So we could see, hey, in the last 30 days, we started higher, we're moving lower. Hey, there's a dip right around July 5th. What was going on? Oh, it's the 4th of July weekend, to be expected for most businesses. So you start to kind of pinpoint some some key dates. Other things, you might see a big spike. Maybe you did a big Facebook post that got great engagement, or you had an awesome email campaign that went out and linked over the site. You could start to see where those spikes and those valleys come from each of these. And you can also, again, click in to see more and more information. And then we have our, how well do you retain users? This isn't necessarily something that every business needs to worry about. Not every business needs people coming back to their website multiple times throughout, let's say, 6 weeks, but it's letting you know how often and what percentage of your users come back to the site. A lot of times they might just be Googling to see what your sale is, and they're gonna pop into the store, or they wanna order one item online. But then there's other things where maybe you have a customer portal that they need to log into, and when you start to see that dwindle, you might start to worry a little bit more about that. And then this is some of my favorite portions too, because I like to use this data to work with social and email marketing campaigns, or maybe it's just a friendly personal email, or you have some marketing automation or a text, things like that. Right now, this is giving a very high level overview of when are people on your site the most. So this I kind of look at as a general map. Again, it's not a set in stone. This means this is how it works. You'll see these will change over time too, but you can start to see, okay, if people are really more interested in my site on Wednesday morning-ish time, maybe that's a good time to start targeting them. You could see, obviously, middle of the night, probably not the time you're going to get the best engagement. Sometimes you'll see some weird spikes, like I don't know what's going on Monday at 9 o'clock, but seemed to be a hot spot on this website. Maybe there was an outage, or maybe you had a sale, something like that. On every Monday you were posting, it'll give you some options. Then you can see where your users are too. At this level, it's an incredibly high level overview. So this screen isn't as important as it is a shortcut. So when you click in location overview, it's really cool. You can go and see United States right now is obviously the hottest spot for people using your website because it's a US-based company. When you would click on this, you could see, hey, Nebraska is the hottest spot because it's a Nebraska-based company. And you can click on Nebraska and see what cities are trending the most. And you can even start to dig in deeper than that. So it really starts to give you some information on where your users are coming from. I know we've noticed some interesting things in the past. Maybe it was a gift shop selling Nebraska goods, something to that effect. You'd be like, wow, we have a really hot following in Modesto, California. So there must be a bunch of ex-Nebraska people living in there. So maybe it's worth it to start looking at some targeted ads in certain zip codes, things like that. One of the biggest things too, don't make a rash decision just because something popped up for 1 week doesn't mean, unless there's something going on that's very time sensitive, really start to look at it from a more of an overview and not just a quick, hey, yesterday it was trending really hot in Salina, Kansas. We better target that. Give it a day or two unless there's something specifically correlating to that. And then last over here on your right, we see our what are your top devices. So again, this lets us know mobile, desktop, and tablet, where most of your traffic's coming from. You can see where traffic's trending versus previous ones, depending on what your range is. Again, these are kind of 30 days, 7 days, but you can go in and change what these are without digging too deep into analytics. Everything I've shown you so far is just on one page. So it really gives you a lot of information. And then when we start to kind of dig in a little bit deeper on some of these, we can go and take a look at demographics. So maybe this is a little bit more key to yours. You can see who's visiting your website, who's got more of, what demographics are visiting the most. So in this instance, we could see this website, maybe trended a little bit more male, 53 to 46. We could see the majority of those users were in the 25 to 34 age range. Again, you could see at the top here, this only is indicative of about a quarter of the users. So it can't track everybody, but if they're logged in and Google knows your information, things like that, it will give you a decent overview. It's not set in stone like anything is on here. Google's not tracking your every move, but if you give them some leniency to track some of your moves, they're definitely going to track all they can. And then down here in the affinity category, and the in-market segment, it also kind of helps you get in to take a look a little bit more at what are these people interested in. So again, when you're looking at AdWords or you're looking at social media, maybe Facebook ads, things like that, you could say, okay, well, if my business is doing this and the majority or a good portion of our users are interested in cooking enthusiasm and fast food cravings and pet lovers, things like that, you could also start to target some groups like that on Facebook. So it gives you a little bit of an insight on what people are visiting, what type of people are visiting your site, and how you could possibly use that information to take it into other channels as well. And then another piece that I kind of like on here is the behavior flow. So you kind of look at it from this instance. I know this is a little bit more of a daunting screen that once you get deeper and deeper in, but let's say you set up with an objective on your site. Ideally, you would like them to visit your site, go to the shopping page, and then go to the check out a product, and then go to your checkout page. This kind of lets you know what the flow is. So if they're starting on the home page, then the first interaction, maybe they're going to a residential page, a careers page, things like that. And you can start to see what pages they go to next. So even though this gets a lot more in depth, I think it's important because it helps start to show the behavior patterns of a user. So you could say, hey, they're coming to my homepage and no one's going to my about page, which I really want them to, but they're going to all these other ones. You need to maybe take a look at your homepage and say, hey, why isn't it performing like I want it to? Maybe you're not putting enough emphasis on it. Maybe it's too distracting and you have 20 links on it and you're just hoping they would choose one. It starts to really kind of give you a lot of different information that you can go from on there and start to see what type of interactions people are having in what order of your page, not just which pages are most popular, but how people go from A, B to C, or maybe they go to A, B, E, things like that. Like I said, we could do hours on just analytics. So just want to give you a brief overview in case maybe you didn't know that all this information was available for free at your fingertips there once you get Google Analytics configured on your website. And then kind of last but not least, we start to get into the paid aspect. So now you know the behaviors, you know what demographics they have, you know Google's indexing your site, but you're still not getting that traffic that you really wish you had. AdWords is a huge beast. This is where Google makes most of their money on it. So this is a paid service, but the good part is you only pay when it's performing to a degree in the way that you want. So when people are clicking on the ads and getting to your website, that's when you get charged. So it's not just, hey, it's out there. In general, there's ways to do that, but that's kind of a discussion for another time. But it's really kind of AdWords time next. So you get in there and it really helps you get in front of customers. So if you don't know what the AdWords are, when you Google your company and you're like, hey, why does this Studley's flower show up instead of mine? But it says ad next to it, they're paying for that. So if people were searching for Flower Shops Omaha and the Studley's ad showed up instead of yours and maybe you're fifth or sixth, well, they're paying to be up there. Google will denote that it's an ad, but one thing we've also noticed, the more you kind of play by all the other rules and you start to do their ads over time, your cost per click can go down and your organic SEO can go up. So they do kind of work together in unison on that. Google's always very vague about how their analytics and things like that work because they don't want to give the whole info away just to let somebody else kind of take it and run with it. And if everybody knew exactly how it worked, people would use it to exploit it. So they're a little vague on how they do it. So I can only speak to what I've kind of noticed over time and what lots of other studies and things like that have learned over time. But once you're in there, let's say you're brand new, you've never done AdWords before, it's going to ask you, what is your main advertising goal? And so in this instance, they give you three options. You want more calls? So maybe you're a sales company and you're just like, we just need the phone to ring. That might be a little bit better option for you. Next is you want more web sales or signups, or your business is primarily based and you just need traffic. Then you might look at that option next, which is get more sales or signups. And then last but not least, it's get more visits to your physical location. So maybe you just have a website that tells a little bit about who you are. You got your Google business listing up and running. so people can find you, but you just need them to set their foot in your store. You might take a look a bit more at getting visits to your physical location. So that's going to lean a little bit heavier on maps and putting ads in that. So when people are just, maybe they're in the old market for the first time and they say, I want a restaurant, you could start, and they type in restaurants, old market, Omaha, then you're more apt to show up as a top ad on that versus just a listing of everyone's restaurants in there at that point. But once you kind of start that, no matter what option you choose, the next thing you want to do is you want to geo-target your ads. So what's really cool about this, for instance, let's say I was starting one and I wanted to target Omaha, Council Bluffs, Bellevue, Carter Lake, Crescent, Iowa, all of those. You could start to make up this map right here. And right on the right side, it's going to tell you your potential audience. So as you're adding these areas in, it's telling you the audience size is potentially 2,384,412 people a month that you're advertising to. If you don't want to get as specific as just Omaha, let's say you wanted to do, around 13th Street, which is 68108, you could put that zip code in and add a radius of, say, 10 miles around that, and it will just geo-target that. So that means when people are searching for you, maybe in West Omaha, and you only have a 5-mile radius around your zip code, you're not going to show up as much, or you're not going to show up as all, so you're not wasting ad dollars on people that aren't in your area. Because if you just tried to advertise a restaurant in Omaha and it was showing up in Kansas City and Austin and Chicago, you're just wasting money on that. So it lets you really go in and target a bit more what you really, who you want to target on that. The next thing you do is you go in and you start giving your keywords. This one is, again, a super high-level overview. There's lots and lots of really in-depth keyword planners that you can go in on. And once you feel like, hey, this isn't giving me enough options, there's a ton of different ways we can go about this. I'm just going over the very simple 1, 2, 3 and AdWords setups. So let's say you put bed linens, kitchen linens, bath linens in there. It's going to give you more suggestions based on what keywords you've put in there. So, and as we do that, your potential audience size on the right starts to grow as well. So the more words we add in there, the more that audience size is going to grow. So it really gives you a big in-depth option on that as you get further in, but we're just kind of a shotgun start to setting up AdWords right now. So once you do that, you're going to start to create your ads. By default, it actually is going to start writing some of them for you. If you have no clue what you're doing and you don't want to get too involved, but you just want to dip your toes in the water, fine way to go about it. You could definitely optimize it a lot further once you have some knowledge of what you're doing and getting in there. So I don't recommend this that much, but if you're just really trying to, hey, we're super slow, I got some ad money I need to spend right now, don't have time to really think about it too much, and you want to kind of 1, 2, 3 click, it's going to take a look at the website you entered, it's going to draw some of the keywords out of there, and it's going to write these AdWords for you just to get started on that. Once you kind of have them in there though, let's say you made 4 ads, they're running, now it's time to kind of manage, track, and refine your ads. So once we get to that point, we take a look and we say, hey, here's some of the ads that we initially set up. We could see what type of ad they were, what kind of they made, how many people saw them, how many people clicked on it, what kind of CTR, which is click-through ratio, do we have. Kind of a general industry standard is 2%. So if you're getting 2, 4, 10%, something like that, you're doing awesome. Most people, just because they see an ad doesn't mean they're going to click it. And so that's kind of how you get that ratio in there of clicks, impressions, which just means how many times it's going to show up, and then what percentage of those is going in. Once you have a campaign going, you can start to see all the dollars associated with it, things like that, to really get you a bit more in depth into it. Over time, you could start to go in and track a lot more of this. You could see how many leads you have. You could set up different campaigns, maybe one's for Christmas, one's for Easter, one's for summer, one's for fall, different aspects of it. You could start to really refine what information you have going in there. And then you could start to see what keywords are really popular. So we could say, For Rebel, some of our most popular ones was digital advertising agency, branding agency, things like that. And it's funny because, especially when you're in an industry, you might use lingo that you use every day and you think everybody uses it. But going in here and seeing which keywords is most popular really helps give you an idea of what the average user is searching for. So sometimes we'll be like, man, we don't call it that. That's not what it's called. But if that's what your users are calling it, then you need to take that into consideration, that you're losing traffic just because you don't think they're calling it the right name. There's also a thing in here called negative keywords. So maybe if we were putting ads out for brands and we were getting a lot of clicks on beauty brands, well, that's not what we do at all. It could just be somebody searching. So you can put negative keywords in there. So if people are searching for beauty brands, or you get some weird characters, or they're searching for Adidas, things like that, and you don't want, or cheap, things like that, that you know isn't really going to be your target market, you can put those negative keywords and it works just like it sounds, the opposite of a keyword. It allows them to be removed from anybody using those search terms. And then once you have your ads and you have some results for going in, this would be more, hey, I'm going in and I'm writing my own ads. So you want it to go to a specific web page on your website. You put in headlines. You do this based on what has been working and what hasn't. So just like your website, just like anything, it's not just you build it once and it's good to go forever. You really want to go in and spend some time, or find somebody that can spend some time on your behalf to go in there and really start to refine some of these pieces in there so you can get the most out of it. Because I mean, it's your money. Otherwise, you could just be throwing it away a little bit by letting it set and roll and it's underperforming. So get that info that's out there for you, utilize it, keep growing with that. And that was a lot. So I'm sorry if it seemed like I was just flying through things, or if it was incredibly slow and boring. Either way, feel free if anybody has any questions. I know we're doing a panel after this. I think I got 5 more minutes right now. And also, here's my contact information. If you need some more information, you know, you just have a couple specific questions, or maybe you need some help actually get anything set up, Rebel's here for you as well. So feel free to contact me directly at Corey@rebel-interactive.com. And
so we do have one question.
Awesome.
Yeah. So out of the options we've talked about during this conference, which has included, you know, social media, email, online shopping, which has the greatest on the SEO and Google ranking?
I personally, and again, this could kind of be a loaded question. First off, they all work together. So doing all of them to some degree is my answer for best, but without just being a cop-out on that. I think the Google My Business listing is often the very first thing people see on you, especially on mobile, and it can go in your Maps app, and it's a little bit more broad. And I feel like if you're going to do everything else without first doing that, it's a little bit backwards on it. That way, at least everyone can find your info. It's info that you know is correct. It's what you're putting out there. And then you start to market on top of that. Because if you're marketing and people are Googling your name real quick and they have an old location or a wrong phone number, it's going to be harder for them to find you. So I definitely recommend getting your listings squared away, and then start worrying about your website, your social, your email marketing, things like that. Just make sure you're being found easily first, or at least correctly, before you start to rise up in the search rankings.
Great. Is it worth competing in large industries with AdWords, finding alternate marketing channels, for instance, competing against large businesses in AdWords?
So that it's yes and no. A lot of times it's not, but that's not to say don't do it. It's often find your niche in it. Find what you do differently from them. Find out what people might be searching for. You know, if you're a boutique style shop and, you know, a boutique shoe store going up against a Shoe Palace or Foot Locker or something like that, don't just, you know, say, find your shoes here. You want to specialize that you're a locally based boutique market for shoes, things like that. So there are ways you can go in and find some keywords that aren't as expensive. You can do that without a ton of commitment, because if you're just doing the word shoes. If someone's searching, you know, obviously Foot Locker or Nike, someone, they're going to have a way bigger budget than you do. So in that case, it's not competing if you're just going to do it lackadaisically. But if you're willing to spend a little bit more time and really see what you're doing different, and in some of those keyword planners I was mentioning too, you can see what the average cost in your area is for those. So maybe take a look at some of the lesser ones, or geo-targeted enough to where if it's, you know, again, I'm just using the old market as a reference, you know, maybe you're only targeting people within those few miles and things like that. So you could still compete to a level, but there's definitely industries where it's